it may take a moment for Illumin to get back in.
Yeah, that's what. Once he gets, I think you can get going. Sorry for the inconvenience. No, we needed. I didn't realize that Aarti was using the general link that we use for everyday Scrum calls.
Yeah. So RT, you may want to stop recording until Illumin gets on.
Okay. All right. So I guess I was mentioning on this slide before we got dropped that this training is within, in terms of the overall transformation journey, this stream is within the enable, right? Enable stage where, we have defined some processes and we're trying to sort of enable the teams. So this meeting session is just reviewing some process changes. There would be work sessions and there will be office hours, during which anyone leveraging any of the defined processes that's having any questions can reach out to us and, during the office hours for support. And, the idea is, in the steady state, right? The PSEG team can just run with this. A few reminders is, the CMMI framework is now replacing SGP. These training sessions will happen. They're role-based, right? Test leads, business analysts, and whatnot. And one key date to remember is by September 12, we're hoping for a process adoption checkpoint where, we're going to see based off of a select number of projects, how the adoption is proceeding. So every defined process templates has been turned over to PSEG and they are on the EPMO side. So any questions so far? All right, so I just want the procurement team to share with me what are the key things that, the first things that come to your mind when you have to address suppliers, in your role at PSEG, just making the session interactive. This question goes to Jim, as well as Carol and any other member of the PSEG procurement team.
Sure. So what comes to mind in terms of our engagement with suppliers?
Right.
Yeah. So typically, I guess from my perspective, are they satisfying a need as I'm getting as I'm building an RFP, right? And if I've gathered business requirements from my client, and I'm trying to figure out whether they would be a good fit for us based on the business requirements outlined. Also curious as to how they will comply with our terms and conditions. Are they financially stable? Things of those nature. That's kind of what comes to mind offhand.
Thank you very much for sharing. In fact, there may be a lot of deliverables or functions as part of supplier agreement management, but in the end, Jim, as you mentioned, is in terms of the requirement that you have received and the relationship between PSEG and the supplier are both parties, right, meeting their respective obligations, right? So that's basically, in a nutshell, the supplier agreement management, right? So establishing an agreement between, the supplier in relation to, what it is that needs to be delivered, right? The deliverables, right? And why is it important, right? It's important because, having a defined process, right, ensure that there is follow-through in order to maximize the success, right, of the agreed upon effort, right? So that what PSEG signed up for is delivered, and the supplier also, they get the end of the deal, right? So that's basically, when what it is when it comes to supply agreement management, right? But in terms of the processes that we have defined, right? The the key change that we have made, because there are different teams within PSEG, our understanding is that the intent of the practice is met when it comes to CMMI. And, you know, when it comes to just daily operations, teams are doing what they need to make sure that suppliers are delivering according to terms. But what we're doing now, or what we've done, is to put in place a process, define a process, okay, that lays out the activities to be completed, activities before you engage with the supplier, and activities after you've engaged with the supplier. All right, so that all teams have a common reference point, execute from a common set of standard, right? So here on the screen are some of the key actions or activities that, you know, we're expecting, right, PSEG staff to engage in before a supplier is engaged, right? Identify what it is that needs to be procured, right? Go through a process of selecting a supplier, right? Following different methods like make, buy, use analysis, for example, right? And nail down the details requirements, and then establishing the agreements, right? And then when the supplier is onboarded, right? Before that, have in place a supplier management plan. How are you going to go about managing this relationship, all right, between your project and the supplier, right? As part of this, there will be progress reviews, there will be process monitorings, okay, in terms of scorecards, and then conducting an acceptance testing when the services have been delivered. Any questions before I move on to the next slide?
Okay.
All right. So here we're looking at a high level in terms of the process definition, you know, what is expected before a supplier is engaged, right? And perform a make buy, okay, analysis, right? In terms of determining whether, you know, this can be the need can be fulfilled in-house, or whether an outside supplier is to be engaged, right? So as part of this, there would be a finalized list of services to be procured, right? Then, you know, now that you have come to a decision that, okay, we need to engage an outside supplier, well, who's going to provide the service, right? So go through the process of selecting a supplier, okay, in terms of using a specific criteria, which may have to do with the prior experience and, you know, the specific capabilities that they have in the on the subject matter, right? So the idea is that, you know, reviewing suppliers, you may actually come to settle on a finalized list of suppliers or just one supplier, right? And then moving in terms of the specific requirements, right? What it is that we're going to procure, Jim, as you mentioned, right? And make sure that these are spelled out in the supply agreement. So, you know, when you're moving from this point, at this point, you will have the key requirements, right, that are going to make it into the supply agreement, right? So then eventually now you want to, working with the supplier, you want to establish the agreement, you know, the SOW or whatnot, right? And as part of this, if there is an opportunity to proactively establish a scorecard so the supplier knows what they're going to be measured on, okay, during the execution, okay, this is the time to clarify that with the supplier with, you know, back and forth questions, and also establish a mechanism. Things do happen where, you know, something has changed, right? What is the mechanism, right, to go through a change request? Have that defined and have that mutually agreed on, right, before, and then obtain all the sign off. So when you at this stage, at the end, you're expected to have a duly signed supply agreement, you know, the scorecard that you're going to be used to evaluate them during the project. Portions of it are included in this agreement, and you have a full supplier agreement scorecard outside of that as well. Any questions? All right, let's move on to next. Now we have engaged the supplier, right? So we need to create the supplier management plan, okay? The supplier management plan is we have created a template that all teams can leverage. And, this is not supposed to be a Bible because there will be some specific scenarios where some things may not apply. But bottom line is the supply management plan, okay, establishes, in fact, I do have, if I will have to log in here, let's see. Right, let's see. Okay, so we have a supply management plan where you sort of, established the provisions, right? The things you're going to hold the supplier accountable for in terms of review of any software, if any change requests are required, if how you're going to evaluate them, right? And if whether or not their processes conform to what you have agreed that they will use, right? So, coming back to the slide deck here, the supplier management plan provide a guide to hold the supplier accountable in terms of the mutually agreed terms of the supply agreement. So as part of this, there would be progress reviews. Okay, outputs of the progress review would be the supplier's performance reports. Okay, and there's also monitoring the processes, right? For instance, we came in and we defined some processes. Let's say PSEG has engaged a software testing firm, right? So PSEG wants everyone executing a PSEG LI project, right, to execute from a common set of standard. So that's why you monitor what that test team you've engaged with, okay, whether or not what they're doing is in accordance to, let's say, the testing approach defines, right? And then there is acceptance testing where you go beyond just a general review to sort of look at the document, the product, to see if they're actually meeting the needs. Any questions on this? All right, move on. So that brings us to the resources that are available to support supply agreement management, right? So key thing here is we have introduced an organizational level process, right? An organizational level process that any PSEG team can leverage. There are technical aspects to supply management, right? The way in which you deal with, let's say, a an IT vendor, right, could be different from the way in which you deal with, let's say, a supplier that engages in government contracts, right? Some things that may be related to corporate social responsibility. So, the process we have defined, it's supposed to serve as a guide with the understanding that there would be some minor deviation or where some tailoring, may be needed. So we've also put together a template, right? So if there is a project on recalibrating meters, okay, and the project management on that team has engaged an outside supplier, okay, the way in which that relationship is managed, okay, we would expect that it would be quite similar to how a different project manager is interacting with a different vendor, because they're both following the same process and they're both leveraging the same the same document for establishing how they're going to manage this relationship. And we have also put together a scorecard with predefined KPIs, right? And I guess I could come in here quickly to show, we've reviewed these as well. So the scorecard, part of this, depending on the project, right? The project team, okay, can decide what, and I guess communicate this. Not all of them would be 100% applicable. Okay, communicate this with the vendor and gain alignment agreement before the contract is signed, right? So you're going to be evaluating the supplier on the quality of the work, okay, and the timely delivery, okay, and the cost, okay. Is it fit for purpose, right? Is it compliant to specification, okay? These are specifically defined. What does it mean to be fit for purpose, okay? Well, let's look at the number of services we received from this supplier that have been subject to rework, okay? So the KPIs here, okay, are broken down specifically in terms of what it means. Is it compliant to specification? Okay, how many of them have been rejected, right? So on and so forth. So we have put together a supplier scorecard, right, to be leveraged for the purpose of evaluating the supplier during the entire project execution. So these artifacts, these resources are available on the EPMO website, and we have linked them in this slide, which Ben would share with everyone attending this meeting. There are some industry specific aspects to deriving contract, right? And during our discovery, we saw those. We saw that PSEG has defined, so some areas are highly technical in terms of SOWs, and those are defined. Those would be example of situation where we can expect some deviation, but at the end of the day, they still need to be complying with the defined process in terms of all the provisions in that supply agreement management process. Any questions at this point? I think despite everything, we managed to finish within the hour.
Good. Thanks.
All right. So if there are no questions, that's all we have. As I mentioned before.
Gentlemen, yeah.
Yes.
A quick thing, right? Siva here. People who have joined the session today, you'll receive we need to capture the attendance as well as we need to collect the feedback. So could you please remind about that?
Sure. Actually, is there something that we send out?
Yeah,
And
Ben would be sending, Ben
or
Adam would be sending that out to the
okay.
participants.
Okay, so we will ask that you please provide feedback on the attendance form. It is greatly appreciated. It's not optional, so please go ahead and give it 2 minutes of your time, because we have even defined a process for organizational training. So it goes without saying that if we're doing training, we have to follow the same process.
Thank you. I just had a couple of quick questions, just clarification for the group.
Yes.
Is the intent to use this methodology on every supplier?
So the process as defined, right? Yes.
Okay.
With the understanding that there will be deviations, there would be some variations, but in the at the end of the day, for instance, we still have 2 minutes or so. Let me see if we have. There's only one.
One thing to clarify is that we're starting with Long Island application projects first. So this would be limited to projects that fall in that category. So Long Island application projects. Later, we'll come back with additional disciplines that covers infrastructure projects.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, yeah, because actually my next follow-up question was the scope of the engagement or the rollout. Is it specific? It's specific to IT in Long Island, correct? It's not across.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I thought so. All right.
And it's, at some point, New Jersey may start following or in whole or in part these enhancements, these best practices that we're rolling out for Long Island. But initially, it's just Long Island IT application projects.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, key points. But I think that's what you're getting at. But at the end of the day, the details will be different. But when it comes to following this process, okay, we want to see that what it is to be procured has been clearly identified, that the team went through a process of selecting suppliers, and that the requirements were duly provided, so on and so forth, right? The details will be different, but I think your question was bigger, right? In terms of, okay, what is the scope? And it's PSEGLIIT.
Great. Okay. No, thank you. Appreciate it.
No worries. All right, with this, I can stop the sharing. And please, once again, we're asking that you provide the feedback on the attendance. It's greatly appreciated. It's not optional. Thanks again.
Yes, we have a form that we'll be sending out soliciting back, and that'll go out after the session today. And RT, if you could, I think you can probably stop recording now.
Okay, Ben. Yeah, I'll do that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.